There are certain images in storytelling that feel like they were unearthed rather than invented. They're so deeply embedded in our collective imagination that they feel ancient, primal. For me, one of the most powerful is the image of the Black Riders, the Nazgûl, sweeping across the rolling hills of the Shire. We feel the sudden chill in the air, the unnatural silence that falls over the fields. We hear the sound of the hooves, the whisper of their cloaks, and that terrifying, soul-piercing shriek that is part cry of victory, part wail of eternal loss. They are the ultimate hunters, relentless, terrifying, and seemingly unstoppable. Their mission is simple, singular, and absolute. Find the ring-bearer and recover the one ring for their master. And from the moment they appear, we understand the stakes. Frodo is not just running from an enemy, he is running from a nightmare made real. But here's the thing nobody really talks about. Here's the question that, once you ask it, unravels everything you think you know about these creatures. For all their terror, for all their power, for all their relentless pursuit across hundreds of miles of hostile territory, not once, not a single time, does a ring-wraith ever make a move to take the ring for themselves. Think about it. At Weathertop, 5 of them have Frodo cornered, wounded, and helpless. The Witch King himself is standing over him. They could have taken it. At the Ford of Bruinen, they are within inches of their prize before the river rises against them. They could have taken it. Even earlier, in the Shire, one of them speaks to Gaffer Gamgee, mere feet from Bag End, where the ring sits wrapped in an envelope. They are always so close, and yet the final act of seizing it seems to be something they are fundamentally incapable of performing. The easy answer, the one that most people settle for, is simple obedience. They are slaves to Sauron's will, bound to him by the 9 rings they wear. They are extensions of his ambition, puppets on a string, and they do what they are told. But that answer feels too neat, too simple for a world as complex and psychologically deep as Tolkien's. This isn't a story about robots following programming. It's a story about the corruption of the soul. And the ring. The ring has a will of its own. It seduces the powerful, it preys on desire, and it promises to be the ultimate tool for anyone who wishes to dominate others, and who, in all of Middle-earth, was more defined by a lust for power than the 9 great kings and sorcerers of men who became the Nazgûl. So why didn't the ultimate tool of power tempt the ultimate seekers of power? What we're about to uncover is a secret hidden in plain sight, a tragedy far deeper than simple servitude. It's a secret about the nature of the ring, the horrifying reality of the Nazgûl's existence, and the one thing Sauron feared more than anything else. What would have actually happened if the Witch King, standing over a fallen Frodo on Weathertop, had reached out and claimed the one ring for himself? The answer changes everything. To understand the core of this mystery, we first have to establish what we know. We have to lay out the official story, the baseline understanding of what the Nazgûl are. Tolkien tells us they were once 9 great lords of men. 3 were of the noble race of Númenor, the greatest civilization of men that ever existed. The others were powerful kings, sorcerers, and warriors from across Middle-earth. To these 9, Sauron, in his fair guise as Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, gave 9 rings of power, and the men, as Tolkien writes, proved the easiest to sway. They took the rings, and for a time they achieved everything they had ever wanted. They became mighty in their day, accumulating vast wealth and glory, wielding immense power. They could make themselves invisible and walk in the twilight world of the unseen. They had, it seemed, cheated death itself, achieving a form of immortality. But it was a poisoned gift. For their rings were, of course, bound to the one ring that Sauron secretly forged in the fires of Mount Doom. And as his power grew, their rings consumed them. Their physical bodies faded. Their life was stretched unbearably until it became a kind of living death. They became specters, wraiths, permanently trapped between the world of the seen and the unseen, their minds and wills utterly enslaved to the will of Sauron, the master of the One Ring. They became his most terrible servants, the Nazgûl, the ring-wraiths, the Nine. This is the story we all know. They are instruments of terror, extensions of Sauron's will, elite hunters dispatched on his most critical errands. Their primary mission in The Lord of the Rings is clear: hunt down the Hobbit Baggins, retrieve the ring, and kill him if necessary. And they are terrifyingly effective. They can sense the ring's presence. The ring calls to them. Their mere presence inspires a paralyzing fear known as the Black Breath, which can drain the will to live from all but the strongest hearts. They are formidable in combat, especially their leader, the Witch King of Angmar, a sorcerer and warrior of immense power who laid waste to the northern kingdoms of men centuries before our story even begins. So, on the surface, the picture is clear. They are powerful, they are motivated, and they are loyal slaves. But this is where we have to introduce the first complication, the first piece of evidence that doesn't quite fit. For all their fearsome reputation, the Nazgûl's pursuit of Frodo is marked by a series of very strange failures and hesitations. At the Buckleberry Ferry, they arrive just moments too late, balking at the water's edge. In Bree, at the Prancing Pony, their plan to assassinate the hobbits is cleverly thwarted by Aragorn, but their attack itself is surprisingly straightforward. A brutal, unsubtle assault that seems to lack any real cunning. And then there's Weathertop. This is the crucial scene. 5 of them, including their captain, have Frodo and his companions cornered. Aragorn is present, yes, but he is one man against 5 of these ancient beings. The hobbits are terrified. Frodo, in a moment of panic and against all advice, puts on the ring. And in that moment, he sees them for what they truly are: pale, ghostly figures with burning eyes, robed in gray, with swords in their spectral hands. The Witch King advances on him, holding a long, thin blade. He stabs Frodo in the shoulder. And then, what? They retreat. Aragorn drives them off with fire, a weakness we'll return to, but the sequence of events is bizarre. Why not simply overpower Aragorn? Why not just take the ring from the paralyzed hobbit on the ground? The Witch King has already struck his blow, a magical one with the Morgul blade, designed to turn Frodo into a wraith like them. Why not finish the job? This isn't just a momentary lapse, it's a pattern. They seem to possess an overwhelming advantage only to falter at the final, critical moment of confrontation. It's as if there is a line they cannot or will not cross. And this is where we have to deepen the stakes. If their hesitation isn't just plot armor for the hero, if it isn't just a convenient weakness, then what is it? It means that their relationship with the ring and with their master is far more complex than that of a simple slave and his tool. It implies a hidden rule, a psychological or magical barrier that is just as real as a physical wall. And Tolkien himself gives us a clue, a thread to pull on, in one of his letters. He writes that the Nazgûl had been accustomed to deal with men and to fill them with terror, but they were out of their element, dealing with the tougher and more courageous hobbits. He suggests they were actually afraid, that their power was primarily one of fear, and when met with courage, it could be broken. But afraid of what? Afraid of a hobbit with a small sword? Afraid of a ranger with a torch? Or were they afraid of something else entirely? Something standing right in front of them. The very thing they were sent to retrieve. What if the Nazgûl weren't just hunting the ring? What if, on some deep, fundamental level, they were terrified of it? To truly grasp what's happening here, we need to go deeper into the metaphysics of Tolkien's world. Specifically, we need to understand the concept of the unseen world, or the Wraith world. This isn't just a different dimension, it's a different mode of perception, a spiritual reality that coexists with our physical one. Great spiritual power, both good and evil, resides there. The elves, especially the high elves like Glorfindel, have a strong presence in this world. Beings like Gandalf and Sauron are masters of it, and the rings of power act as a bridge. When Frodo puts on the One Ring, his physical body becomes invisible in the seen world, but he becomes fully visible in the unseen. This is why the Nazgûl can suddenly see him so clearly on Weathertop, because they, the ring wraiths, are permanently trapped in that world. Their physical forms have faded away entirely. What we see, the black robes, the armor, is just clothing, giving shape to a formless terror. They themselves exist almost entirely in the unseen. This is the source of their power, but it is also the source of their greatest weakness and their deepest horror. Imagine living in a state of perpetual twilight. The physical world around you appears gray, shadowy, and indistinct. But the spiritual world, the world of wills, of power, of souls, blazes with a terrifying light. This is the world the Nazgûl inhabit, and in that world, the One Ring is not a simple piece of gold jewelry. When Frodo wears it, he sees the Nazgûl as they are, ancient, withered kings, their royalty twisted into a mask of despair. But what do they see when they look back? They see the ring. And the ring in the unseen world would be a terrifying vortex of pure, unadulterated power. It would be a blazing sun of raw will, the concentrated essence of their master's very being. It's not just an object, it's a presence, a voice, a promise. And this brings us to a critical piece of analysis. The Nazgûl are defined by their weaknesses as much as their strengths. They cannot cross running water, not because they're physically unable, but because water, especially water that flows from pure sources like the river Bruinen, holds an ancient power and memory of the world before evil. It's anathema to them. They fear fire, because fire is a symbol of life, of inner flame and courage, the very things they have lost. As Aragorn says, Sauron can use fire, but his servants do not love it. These aren't arbitrary fantasy rules. They are symbolic. They show us that the Nazgûl are fundamentally hollow. They are beings of shadow, and they recoil from things that possess a pure, untainted essence. Now, apply that logic to the One Ring. The ring is not pure or good, far from it. It is pure evil, but it is also pure essence. It is the undiluted will of Sauron. It is a concentration of power so immense that it is, in its own way, as elemental as fire or water. For a hollowed-out, spectral being like a Nazgûl, to confront the ring directly would be like a moth flying into a searchlight. It is the source of their power, yes, but its proximity is also agonizing. This is why they shriek. It's not just for effect. It's an expression of a constant, unending pain, the pain of their stretched, unnatural existence, amplified to an unbearable degree by the nearness of the ring that binds them. This lets us construct a speculative scene to imagine what it was truly like on Weathertop from their perspective. They close in on the small figures. The physical world is a blur of gray rock and shadow, but one of those figures, the smallest one, is a beacon in the unseen. He is a focal point of a power that alternately calls to them and repels them. They feel the ring's presence like a physical ache, a screaming in their spectral ears. Their only instinct, drilled into them over millennia of servitude, is to serve their master. But another instinct, the ghost of a memory of self-preservation, screams at them to stay back. Then the hobbit vanishes from the seen world and appears fully in theirs, and he is holding it, not just a ring, but a furnace of will, a vortex of command. And the Witch King, the most powerful of them all, feels a terror he has not felt since he faced the might of Gondor and the elves at the fall of his kingdom of Angmar. Because in that moment he faces a choice he is not equipped to make. And this leads us to the uncomfortable question: what if Sauron's control over them isn't as absolute as we think? What if it's more like the control a zookeeper has over a starving lion? The bars of the cage are strong, but you still don't enter the enclosure holding a side of beef. Sauron gave them their rings. Sauron controls them through the One. But the ring itself has its own agenda. It wants to be wielded. It seeks a new master. And perhaps Sauron knew, with cold, calculating certainty, that his most powerful servants were also the ones most vulnerable to the ring's most dangerous promise. Perhaps he knew that if one of them ever laid a hand on it, the result would not be a loyal delivery, but a cataclysm he could not afford. Let's deepen this line of thinking. The fundamental nature of the One Ring is temptation. It doesn't just dominate, it seduces. It finds the deepest desire in a person's heart and offers a path to achieve it. For Gandalf, it offered the power to protect Middle-earth, to enforce good, but in doing so, it would twist him into a tyrant just as terrible as Sauron. For Galadriel, it offered the power to preserve her realm of Lothlorien, to halt the decay of time, and become a queen, stronger than the foundations of the earth. For Boromir, it offered the strength to save his people and the city of Minas Tirith. The ring's promises are always personal, always tailored to the individual. So, we must ask the most important question of all. What would the One Ring promise a Nazgûl? What is the deepest, most secret desire of a being who has been a slave for over 4,000 years? Is it more power? Perhaps. In their former lives they were kings and sorcerers who craved dominion over others. That desire is surely still there, buried deep beneath layers of servitude. The ring could promise to make the Witch King a new Dark Lord, to let him supplant the master he has served for so long. He could cast down Sauron and take the throne of Barad-dûr for himself. This seems like the most obvious temptation, and it's a terrifying prospect. A new Dark Lord, already a master of the unseen world, with the armies of Mordor at his command. This is a possibility that Gandalf himself considers a danger that is very real. But I think there's a deeper, more tragic desire at the heart of the Nazgûl. Think about what they lost. They didn't just lose their freedom. They lost their very selves. Their bodies faded. Their memories of sunlight, of food, of love, of anything other than the cold twilight of the Wraith world are all but gone. They are trapped in a state of eternal, agonizing, unchanging existence. They cannot truly live, and they cannot die. They are echoes, shadows, defined only by their master's will. What, then, would be more tempting than an end to that? The ring could promise them release. It could promise them the one thing Sauron has denied them for millennia, the gift of death. The true death that Eru Ilúvatar granted to men, the release from the circles of the world. Or, perhaps even more potently, it could promise them the opposite, a return. It could offer to restore them, to give them back their bodies, their faces, their names, to make them the kings they once were, not as withered phantoms, but as living, breathing men of flesh and blood, now wielding the ultimate power. Imagine the Witch King of Angmar, standing on Weathertop, hearing that promise whispered directly into his soul. Take me and be a king again, not a shadow, not a slave, a king. That is a temptation that might just be strong enough to shatter 4,000 years of servitude, And Sauron knows this. He created them. He understands their psychology better than anyone. He knows that their enslavement is a delicate balance. He has hollowed them out so completely that they are perfect tools, but that very hollowness is a catastrophic vulnerability. A being with a strong sense of self, like Gandalf or Galadriel, can recognize the ring's promise as a lie and reject it. A simple being with a strong sense of purpose, like Samwise Gamgee, can resist it because his desires are not for power, but for the Shire, for rosy cotton, for his gaffer. But a Nazgûl? A Nazgûl is a void, and a void cannot resist the promise of being filled. This is the terrible paradox at the heart of Sauron's power. He built his greatest servants by destroying their identities, but the ultimate weapon, the One Ring, operates by targeting identity. He has created a weapon that his own elite soldiers cannot safely handle. The Nazgûl are like a bomb disposal squad where every member is, himself, made of nitroglycerin. The slightest misstep, the slightest flicker of independent thought in the presence of the detonator would result in an explosion. And this is why their pursuit seems so hesitant, so strangely cautious. They are not just hunters, they are handlers of an unthinkably dangerous substance, and they are acutely aware that it could unmake them in an instant. Now we can begin to draw the threads together. The chase across the Shire, the hesitations, the fear of fire and water, the strange retreat from Weathertop, it all points to one inescapable conclusion. The Nazgûl were not simply obeying orders. They were walking a razor's edge, caught between their master's command and a terrible personal peril. Let's escalate this to its peak. Let's truly imagine the moment of choice. The Witch King stands over Frodo. The ring is on the hobbit's finger, blazing in the unseen world. It is not silent. It is screaming at him, offering him everything. Power, revenge, release, restoration. For a fleeting microsecond, the ghost of the man he once was, the proud, ambitious sorcerer king who accepted a ring of power so long ago, stirs within the spectral shell. For the first time in centuries, a flicker of personal desire, of "I want," sparks in the darkness. He could take it. He could reach out with his ghostly hand and seize the ultimate prize. What happens in the next moment? Not one, but two catastrophic possibilities unfold, and Sauron would be equally terrified of both. Possibility 1. The ring grants his desire for power. The Witch King takes the ring, and its power floods into him. But he is a vessel, a ghost. He has no body, no anchor in the physical world. He is a being of pure will, but his will has been subjugated to Sauron's for millennia. The sudden influx of the ring's own immense, independent will would not be a transfer of power. It would be a collision. It would be like connecting a household lamp to a stellar nebula. The fragile, borrowed identity of the Witch King, defined only by his service to Sauron, would be instantly and utterly annihilated. He wouldn't become a new Dark Lord. He would be erased. A chaotic, uncontrolled explosion of spiritual energy on Weathertop, a psychic cataclysm that might destroy the ring itself, or fling it into some unknown corner of the unseen world, forever lost to Sauron. Total mission failure, and the loss of his most powerful servant. But there is a second possibility, one that is even more terrifying for Sauron. Possibility 2. The ring offers the more personal promise. It offers to restore him. The Witch King takes the ring, and it whispers, "Be whole again." And it begins to work its magic. It pours its power not into making him a greater wraith, but into undoing the damage, into reversing the process of fading. It tries to rebuild a physical body around his spirit, to give him back his flesh, his face, his name. But that process is a violence against his very nature. He hasn't had a body for thousands of years. The ring would be trying to create something from nothing, using a blueprint that is only a faint, corrupted memory. The result would not be a resurrected king. It would be a monstrous, agonizing transformation. A being caught between states, a screaming vortex of spirit and half-formed matter. He would be driven completely and utterly insane, a rogue element of immense power, bound to no one, lost in a hell of his own making. A new Tom Bombadil, but one of malice and madness. A force of chaos that could threaten Mordor itself. Sauron cannot risk either of these outcomes. He needs the ring back in his hand, and only in his hand. He needs his servants to be predictable, reliable tools. And so he must have given them an absolute primary command that superseded all others. Do not touch the ring. You can corner the bearer. You can wound him. You can use fear to make him surrender it. But you must not, under any circumstances, lay a hand upon it yourselves. Your job is to locate it, to pin it down, and to bring Sauron himself to it. Or, failing that, to drive the bearer towards Mordor, where the ring's power and the master's will are strongest, and the bearer's resistance will inevitably crumble. Suddenly, their entire strategy makes perfect sense. They aren't trying to seize the ring on the road. They are trying to herd Frodo. Their shrieks are not just to cause fear, but to signal their location to each other and, perhaps, back to Mordor. The wounding of Frodo with the Morgul blade wasn't an attempt to kill him. It was an attempt to make the ring-bearer like them, a wraith, controllable, who could be led back to his master without the Nazgûl having to risk touching the ring directly. It was an act of desperation, and it failed. Their mission was compromised from the very beginning, not by a lack of power, but by a fundamental incompatibility between the hunters and their prey. And here we arrive at the core insight, the great overlooked tragedy of the Nazgûl. We see them as monsters, as the embodiment of evil and fear. And they are. But they are also something far more pitiable. They are prisoners, not just prisoners of Sauron, but prisoners of their own past choices, trapped in a state of being that is a constant, living torment. And the ultimate symbol of their damnation is that the very object that represents their master's power, the source of their own unending existence, is also the one thing that could utterly destroy them. They are forced to hunt for the instrument of their own annihilation. This is the pivot. This is where a story about magic rings and dark lords transcends fantasy and becomes a profound meditation on the human condition. Because this isn't just about the Nazgûl. It's about what happens when you sacrifice your selfhood for power. It's a story about the hollowing out of the soul. The 9 lords of men who became the ring-wraiths began as ambitious, powerful individuals. They wanted to extend their influence, to cheat death, to have dominion over others. They accepted the rings as a shortcut. They chose power over personhood. And over thousands of years, the bargain took its toll. Every act of cruelty performed in their master's name, every choice made to serve his will instead of their own, eroded a piece of who they were. They became less and less the kings and sorcerers of their past, and more just the Nazgûl, a title, a collective noun, a tool. Eventually, there was nothing left inside, no will, no desire, no identity, other than what Sauron poured into them. They are the ultimate cautionary tale against blind obedience and the lust for control. They achieved a form of immortality, but the cost was their identity. They gained immense power, but lost the self that could wield it. And this is why they are so tragically, terrifyingly fragile in the face of the One Ring's temptation. The ring works on the self, but they have no self left to work on. It's like a key searching for a lock that has been filled with cement. Any attempt to force it will not open the door. It will shatter the entire wall. This reframes their entire role in the story. They are not just Sauron's most fearsome servants, they are his greatest failure. They are a testament to the fact that his philosophy of domination is inherently self-defeating. By seeking to control everything, he creates servants who are too broken to handle the very source of his power. And in this story, we have an overlooked hero who perfectly embodies the opposite principle. It's not a great warrior or a powerful wizard. It's Samwise Gamgee. When Frodo is captured in Cirith Ungol, Sam briefly becomes a ring-bearer, and the ring tries to tempt him. It shows him a vision of Samwise the Strong, turning all of Mordor into a vast garden, commanding armies of gardeners to make the world green and beautiful. It is the ultimate temptation for a hobbit who loves growing things. But Sam, in his simple, profound wisdom, rejects it. He says, "I am a gardener." His sense of self is not based on power or domination, but on his nature, his work, his love for the Shire. He knows who he is, and because he knows who he is, the ring cannot find a purchase. Sam's simple identity is an impenetrable shield that the most powerful kings of men, in all their pride, lacked. The Nazgûl are what happens when you lose that shield. They are the long, slow, 4,000-year-old answer to the question, what happens if you forget you're a gardener? So, let's close the circle. Let's return to that image we started with. The Black Riders sweeping across the green fields of the Shire. We no longer see them as just relentless hunters. We see them as ghosts, haunted by the very power they serve. We see the emptiness beneath the black robes, the silent scream of a soul stretched to the breaking point. Their shrieks are no longer just a sound of terror, but a lament, a cry of eternal pain from beings who can't even remember their own names. Their story is a quiet epic of loss, written in the margins of a larger tale. They are the ultimate price of power, the final state of a soul that has traded everything for control and ended up with nothing. What does this journey mean for us? It means that the most fearsome monsters are often the most broken things. It teaches us that true strength isn't the power to dominate others, but the quiet, unshakable knowledge of who you are. The Nazgûl were once men, great men, and their fall reminds us that the path to becoming a monster is often paved with the desire for a shortcut to greatness. They simply forgot that the purpose of living is not to avoid death, but to live a life that has meaning. A life with a garden to tend, a friend to protect, a home to return to. The simple things that anchor us to ourselves. The question we began with was, they could have taken it at any moment, so why didn't they? And now we have the answer, in all its tragic weight. They didn't take the ring because there was no one left inside to take it. There was only the shadow, the echo, and the cold, hollow obedience to a master who had long ago devoured their souls. And in the end, that is a fate far more terrifying than any blade, and a prison far more secure than any dungeon in Barad-dûr. It is the quiet, eternal prison of the self, voluntarily given away. And it is a warning that echoes down through every story, a whisper that reminds us to hold on to the things that make us who we are, lest we too become just a shadow, hunting for a treasure we can never claim. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows. If this exploration gave you a new perspective, let's talk about it in the comments. The beauty of these stories is that there's always another layer to uncover, another secret waiting in the twilight. Stay curious,